All right, good morning, everyone. This is Brendan Auman with DCED. We're about to get started. Currently, I'm joined with Stacy Hawthorne, the ESG Program Manager, and Tony Diaz, the HMIS Administrator, and we will be the ones facilitating this meeting.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 2020 Emergency Solutions Grant application webinar. Brendan had one over who was in the room with us right now. We're hoping during our webinar that Sarah Smith from our Customer Service Center will be joining us to go over the sign-in, the single app login for the application. I understand there has been some changes to that, and she's hoping that she can join us before the end of our presentation. The webinar logistics, it'll last approximately 1 hour. All the phones are muted and the lines will not be open for questions. We will allow questions during the presentation and upon the conclusion of submitting questions throughout the chat box. We'll stop periodically during the webinar to respond to questions. Additionally, of course, anytime you can contact DCED anytime after the presentation for more information, or if you didn't want to ask any questions during the webinar. This webinar and PowerPoint will be posted at www.pennsylvaniacoc.org and DCED's website, the dced.pa.gov/library, and it'll be on our Workplace by Facebook. The purpose of this today, we're going to go over to provide an overview of the application process, including the electronic signature submission. I know on the line we have a couple of veterans that's been, submitting applications, ESG applications for, several years. So I know some of this might be repetitive, but, I'm sure we have some new ones on the line as well. So this would be new information for them. So we're also going to review important reminders and allowable activities for the 2020 funding. We're going to provide you an opportunity to ask application-specific questions, questions not pertaining to the application, programmatic questions, ESG programmatic questions can be submitted to me, Stacy Hawthorne, and my email is shawthorne@pa.gov. Right now, the guidelines and review for submission is open. The period is going to be, it's been open since February 18th, and it's open through March 27th, 2020, and closes at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will not be accepting any applications after 5 p.m. on March 27th. Applications must be submitted through the electronic single application. All attachments must be uploaded into the system by that due date of March 27th. So try not to wait till the last minute to submit your application. That's why we give, ample time with the application process being open, for that reason. We require you still to submit the original copy of your signature page, and the resolution must be postmarked by that same date. And we are not accepting any hard copies of the application other than what is listed above. Eligible applicants, units of local government, including the cities, the boroughs, towns, townships, counties, home rule municipalities, and communities that desire to apply on behalf of other municipalities. Local governments must apply on behalf of a nonprofit organizations which will perform services as a subrecipient. We are now allowing nonprofits to apply for grantees only for regional projects only, which is multiple counties. They must, if you have more than one county, you would be considered a regional project, but you must get permission from your local governing body for any shelter operation projects. This is just information on submitting. When you submit your application, you want to log on into the www.esadced.state.pa.us. You want to log in or register as a new user. Then you want to be sure to put the ESG 2020 on the application as the funding source. If new, you want to click on the left of the page to go to the application walkthrough. And then any ESA or submission questions should be directed to our customer service center at 1-800-379-7448. And again, programmatic questions, ESG programmatic questions can be directed to me, and my number 717-214-5322.
And as Stacy said earlier, we'll cover more of the e-signature process at the end. Hopefully Sarah Smith can join us for that portion. If not, we'll do our best to cover that.
Next is just the general application. When you go into to submit, this is just a sample of what it'll look like. It's not very clear, but you just fill in all the blocks here. It's just a sample on this is just a sample of what the general application will look like in the application. This is the first page you'll see. You fill that out and you move on from there. Next, we have the resolution for municipalities that are applying. You want to, again, make sure all of the blocks are filled in. Nothing should be left blank. The arrow at the bottom is very important. It is not for the nonprofit who may be preparing for the application to sign. That is to be signed by the chief elected official of the municipality. And then the next resolution, this one here is for the nonprofit. Again, you fill out everything, all the lines, the blank lines there, and that can be filled out by, it must be signed by the board president, not the person filling out the application. It must be signed by the board president of the nonprofit organization.
So take a moment to see if there's any questions, and I'm sorry I have to go back and forth since I'm on this laptop. Looks like Jennifer Strauch asked, if the application is submitted prior to the application date, will DCED be able to verify that the attachments will open? If there are file size limitations, will they be noted in ESA?
Hi, Jennifer. I know we had that problem before. Unfortunately, no, but we'll look at to see if there was any problems, technical problems that was not allowing you to submit that. But unfortunately, we can't check prior to the end of the submission time.
Okay, now I'll just give it another moment to see if anything else comes through. Okay.
Next is the allocation, say the anticipated allocations. In terms of our allocations, it may be more or less of the 5.5 million. We're just, at this point, we'll have to wait and see. It's based on when we receive the official notifications, because of course, we did not receive that. This is what we received last year, so could be more, could be less.
Stacy, I will note, this is Kathy Possinger.
Kathy just came in. Kathy Possinger just came in and joined us.
I will note that we did receive our allocation from HUD as of last week, and we did see a slight increase in our ESG appropriation, and that number is 5.7 million. So we did receive a little bit of a bump in our ESG, and while we're here, I will look for that exact number, which I know that I have, and I will forward it over, share it with everyone before the end of our presentation today. But we did receive a slight increase in our allocation overall.
That's good news. Thank you, Kathy. And then available for the grant is the 5.5 or the 5.7 ESG regular allocation. Of course, 40% or more, as we've done in the past, of the total available will be allocated to services and rapid rehousing. No more than 20% will be allocated to emergency shelter activities. just a couple reminders. The minimum grant request of $35,000 for any single activity or a combination of activities. No applications will be accepted if less than $35,000 is submitted. Expenditure deadlines. DCED requires all grantees to invoice quarterly. You can invoice more if you wish, based on what the agency feels the need to do, but you must invoice at least quarterly. And we changed the breakdown just to help grantees meet the expenditure requirements. We started this with the 2019 contracts because of the contracts taking a little longer to finalize. So now all you must submit quarterly, and you must expend 25% within their award, or within your award within the first 5 months of the date of the award letter from the Commonwealth, and then up to 75% by the 13th month, and then your contract must be expended in full 100% by the 18 months, which is the end of the contract period. For match waivers, grantees will be accepted to match 100% of their grant award unless provided a match waiver. For match waivers, in order to be considered to request a match waiver, the applicant must have an annual operating budget of less than $100,000, serve an area that is predominantly low and moderate income persons, more than 60% LMI, and more importantly, a lack of resources to meet the match requirement, which is prohibited in applying. And we don't want you to think that you can apply if you don't have the match, but just understand that this is a competitive grant, and if we get more applications requesting the match than allowed, then you may not be able to be funded because you do not have the match. So just keep that in mind. We don't want to discourage you not to apply if you don't have the match, but if we get several applicants that are requesting match based on the amount that we have, that's going to be considered. For shelter renovations, we will not receive preference to the primary or secondary priorities. Signed contracts with firms doing the renovations and conversions or material purchases must be submitted to DCED within the first 6 months of the contract, and then all work must be completed in 9 months, which is kind of, you want to say, the first year of the contract, being that our contract is 18 months, so it's the first half of the contract. Regional projects, the project must address a regional need and be supported by data, not just an individual county, that is applying within that whole region. It must be an overall regional need. You must demonstrate coordination of activities in all the locations where the funding will be used. You should receiving priority consideration does not guarantee funding. Just because you are coming in for a regional project, even though we look at that as a priority, your application must still meet the criteria in order to be considered. And then you ask why go regional? It provides an opportunity to move different entities around to ensure a more competitive program and better coordination. It also helps, with your subrecipients who may not need a whole lot of funding, and if they have when you have a larger regional project, that kind of helps them out in order to receive the funding as a whole. ESG administration for housing and or redevelopment authorities may not be administrators of the ESG fund unless a competitive bidding process has been completed and documentation of the project is included in the files. Also, the applicant should indicate if another agency is administering the grant in the application. If this process has already been completed, then submit a copy of the agreement with the application. Again, restrictions. The minimum grant request is $35,000 for a single activity or a combination of activities. Even with that minimum request, you must demonstrate the need for those activities. Emergency shelter operation funding request may not exceed 25% of the total shelter operation cost of the grant period. Successful applicants who do provide direct services, you must enter a grant agreement with your third-party subrecipient. That's important. And then also grantees that use the third-party subrecipient are still responsible for the contractual obligations, including oversight and monitoring of the contract. Continuing with restrictions, ESG, the direct entitlement communities, which is Appendix A in the guidelines, may only apply for rapid rehousing, HMIS, and administration funds. Direct entitlement or non-entitlement communities applying on behalf of subrecipients must identify in their narrative whether the subrecipient receives any amount of the direct entitlement ESG fundings for the same activities they are requesting from the state ESG funds. For administrative fund requests, they may not exceed 3.75 of the total amount of fund requested. If you're awarded the admin funds, then your award amount will be reduced. Your admin amount will be reduced 3.75% of the amount that you were awarded. Contracts will not exceed an 18-month period from the date of the award letter, which is the date that is on the award letter. That's the date that the contract starts. No assistance can be obligated beyond the 18-month contract period with the Commonwealth, and any grant funds may only be used for eligible activities outlined in the ESG regs. So we're going to open up for questions here.
Looks like Deb asked, the guidelines and timeline do not include a submission of intent to apply. Is the intent to apply required? And actually this year we are not requiring an intent to apply. So good question, Deb. Thank you. Okay, no other questions. We'll move forward.
Next, we'll turn it over to Brendan.
Thank you, Stacy. The priorities this year have remained unchanged from previous years. Our primary objective is still going to be rapid rehousing. Secondary to that will be street outreach, homelessness prevention, and emergency shelter essential services. And the non-priorities will be shelter operations. And again, there's the language that the funding is limited to the 25% of the total shelter operating budget. DCED will use this funding resource to support HUD's core mission, which is to ensure the most vulnerable populations receive the best outcomes and the highest standards of service. Grantees are expected to end homelessness for participants quickly and efficiently, participate in the local COC and follow their guidance for acceptable participation, and use local coordinated entry process with a housing first approach to providing services. Applicants are expected to address the federal priorities in Home Together, which is the federal plan that was released by USICH, I believe, last year. And those target veterans homelessness, chronic homelessness, family, youth, and children, and then all additional homelessness. And again, we will require that you follow the housing first method when providing services for permanent housing, which means you will service people immediately with no preconditions, behavioral contingencies, or barriers to your programs. In addition to our priorities, we do have some targeted activities, one of which is street outreach. To be able to apply for street outreach, you must have participated in the 2020 PIT count and identified unsheltered homeless individuals and families in your community. The eligible activities under street outreach, again, are case management, engagement, emergency health and mental health services, transportation, and services to special populations. And again, in our regulations, you can find the 24 CFR 576.101, which outlines the eligible expenses for street outreach. The secondary targeted activity is going to be the housing locator services, which are services or activities necessary to assist program participants in locating, obtaining, and retaining suitable permanent housing and increasing housing stability and self-sufficiency. And again, there you can find this in our guidelines that provides an overview of what a housing locator's responsibilities would be, what would be eligible to invoice for. So for conditions for funding, you must provide the LEP or the Limited English Proficiency Plan that's outlined in Section 601 of the Title VI, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then under Executive Order 13166, grantees are required to make reasonable efforts to provide language assistance and meaningful access for LEP persons. And as a part of the LEP, you must provide a 4-factor analysis, the methodology, frequency of program activity contact, the nature and importance of the program, activity or service provided by the program or activity, and the resources available and cost to the recipient. And then the language access plan must be signed by the chief elected official. And if you have any questions regarding the LEP, you would contact Megan in our office. And if you want to reach out to us, we'll be happy to provide you with our contact information.
It's also important to note that there are likely no activities funded out of Emergency Solutions Grant that would not require a language access plan. So in every proposal, in every community, you'll complete your 4-factor analysis, but you will absolutely need to also have a language access plan for your community, detailing how those with limited English proficiency will access the services that you'll provide. There are very, very few activities that are eligible for ESG that would not require this plan.
Thank you, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
Additional conditions for funding: a statement of need is required that really outlines the needs based on a data-informed narrative with a detailed explanation of how homelessness is affecting your community. A description of how the agency will provide a comprehensive range of services, including partnerships with mainstream resources and gaps in services. And I just want to go back and reiterate the emphasis on the data-informed narrative. We want to see some data, how your system performance measures and outcomes are looking, maybe how coordinated entry data is in your community. We really are looking into the data in your narratives. Non-bounce estate applicants must include a copy of their HUD system performance measures, like I just mentioned, and all program design forms must indicate how the agency will meet the needs of the community as outlined in the needs statement. Grantees must submit homelessness data into the HMIS system or a comparable database for DV providers. Again, Housing First is a requirement. Solicitation of participants, community notification of services with priority populations identified. So this is having your local and public meetings to inform that the ESG services are available to outline the plan for your community and to solicit for providers to come in and potentially receive ESG funding. That is a requirement of this grant process. And then for residency requirement, you must not have a residency requirement to receive ESG funding. You must be able to serve all participants. For the program design forms, this is where you'll outline how your program will be operating. One must be submitted for each subrecipient for each service that they are applying for. As I mentioned earlier, with street outreach, but all ESG funded recipients are required to participate in the annual point in time count and provide a timeline of activities to be completed. And then finally, reports. DCED requires a submission of a closeout report and success story. The closeout report must be submitted with the success story no later than 30 days after the end of the contract. But we'd also would encourage that you submit success stories throughout the grant process. We review those and we use them to take them for more advocacy work, potentially.
And also, you will not be able to submit your closeout report without the success story. So your success story is submitted first, and then your closeout report will populate for you to complete.
Thank you. Rent reasonableness and fair market rent. This is a requirement for ESG if you're providing rental assistance. You must have standards that measures your rent reasonableness for your area and that your rents do not exceed the fair market rent. Additionally, all federal requirements must be met in 24 CFR 576, which is also outlined in the application, that we're providing fair housing, equal access to services. We do not prohibit, or there's a prohibition against involuntary family separation, single-sex shelters, and ADA compliance. To elaborate further, no person shall be discriminated against, and programs, activities shall be administered in a manner to affirmatively further fair housing. Equal access to housing services must be open to all eligible individuals and families regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status. Prohibition against involuntary family separation. The age of a child under 18 must not be used as a basis for denying a family's admission to an emergency shelter if the shelter provides services to family with children under 18. Single-sex shelters only allowable under certain conditions, such as serving individuals. Only projects serving individuals may be a single-sex shelter. Single structure with shared bedrooms or bathing facilities. Shelter must not be considered a dwelling unit, or it must have a shared bathing facility. And then with ADA compliance, shelters that receive ESG funding must meet the accessibility standards under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And if your shelter is not currently ADA compliant, you can come in for renovations to reach those standards. All right, we'll take a moment for additional questions. Again, I apologize for flipping back and forth here. Nicole asked, where in the guidelines does it state that direct entitlement communities can only apply for rapid rehousing, HMIS, and admin funds? Nicole, we'll give you a second to find exactly, or give us a second to find exactly where it is in our guidelines. I don't know if it said the exact page on the PowerPoint slide, but it will touch base on that again at the next break. We'll confirm that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tony Diaz.
Hello, I'm going to be beginning with homeless definition. So to define a person as homeless, they must fit into one of the two categories below. The first being literally homeless individuals or families, and the other being individuals or families fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence with no subsequent residence, resources, or support networks, and is literally homeless. So at risk of homelessness. To define a person as at risk of homelessness, they must fit into one of the following three categories below. 1. Has an annual income below 30% of median family income, does not have sufficient resources or support networks, and meets one of the following conditions. Beginning with, has moved because of economic reasons 2 or more times during the 60 days immediately preceding the application for homelessness prevention assistance. Also, is living in the home of another because of economic hardship. And finally, has been notified in writing that their right to occupy their current housing or living situation will be terminated within 21 days after the date of application for assistance. In addition, lives in a hotel or motel, and the cost of the hotel or motel stay is not paid by charitable organizations or by federal, state, or local government programs for low-income individuals. Lives in a single-room occupancy or efficiency apartment unit in which there reside more than 2 persons, or lives in a larger housing unit in which there reside more than 1.5 persons per room as defined by the U.S. Census Bureau. Is exiting a publicly funded institution or system of care, such as a healthcare facility, a mental health facility, faculty, foster care, or another youth facility, or correction program or institution, or otherwise lives in housing that has characteristics associated with instability and an increased risk of homelessness as identified in the DCED's approved consolidated plan. 2. A child or youth who does not qualify as homeless under Section 387(3) of the Runaway Ad Homeless Youth Action. Or 3. A child or youth who does not qualify as homeless under Section 7242 of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. 42 U.S.C. and the parents or guardian of that child or youth living with her or him. Eligible activities include rapid rehousing, street outreach, homeless prevention, emergency shelter, homeless management information system, and administration. So, documentation of homelessness. Documentation of homelessness. Previously recorded webinar on the DCED Federal Reserve Library is available. The requirements include written documentation that is collected at intake, and you must verify homeless status. Priorities for obtaining this evidence includes third-party documentation, including written and source documentation and HMIS records, intake worker observations, and certification from persons seeking assistance as they are self-declared. If funded, this information must be submitted with every invoice where you require reimbursement under rapid rehousing and homeless prevention. Emergency shelters must provide proof of clients served. And there's a form supplementing documentation requirements to be submitted to DCED.
And I'll just make a little note there. It does say in there, if funded, this information must be submitted for every invoice for rapid rehousing and homeless prevention. But I just want to emphasize the fact that this documentation should be obtained for every client served, regardless of the category.
Yep.
And then again, just reiterating the priority for obtaining the evidence should be third-party, written intake by your caseworkers, and then self-declaration from the participant. And there you'll find just a copy of what the documentation of homelessness looks like.
And this is the form, if awarded and you submit invoices, this is the form that must be completed for each client that comes in to receive the services. That documentation of homelessness form must be completed and put in the client file. Next, we'll turn it over to Brendan to talk about the written standards.
Yeah, so every community should have written standards. I know the Balance of State COCs just released their COC-wide written standards for both ESG and COC services, and they should outline or have in there what I'm about to cover, which are just standard policies and procedures for evaluating individuals and families' eligibility for ESG assistance, standards for targeting persons experiencing homelessness and providing essential services related to street outreach, policies and procedures for admission, diversion, referral, and discharge by emergency shelters assisted under ESG, including standards regarding length of stay, if any, and safeguards to meet the safety and shelter needs of special populations, for example, victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and individuals and families who have the highest barriers to housing and are likely to become homeless the longest. Additionally, these are policies and procedures for assessing, prioritizing, and reassessing individuals and families' needs for essential services related to emergency shelter, policies and procedures for coordination among rapid rehousing assistance providers, homelessness prevention, and emergency shelter providers, other homeless assistance providers, and mainstream service and housing providers listed under the 24 CFR. Policies and procedures for determining and prioritizing which eligible families and individuals will receive rapid rehousing assistance and homelessness prevention assistance. The written standards should be used for determining what percentage or amount of rent and utility costs each program participant must pay, and when applicable, while receiving homelessness assistance, standards for determining how long a particular program participant will be provided with rental assistance, and how long or how that amount of assistance will be adjusted over time. Standards for determining the type, amount, and duration of housing stabilization and/or relocation services to be provided to a program participant, including the limits, if any, on the homeless prevention or rapid rehousing assistance that each program participant may receive, such as the maximum amount of assistance, maximum number of months the program participant may receive assistance, or the maximum number of times the program participant may receive assistance. The standard should also include the utilization of the LEP.
And moving on with performance measures and goals, when in the application, you must write your target goals for each. You must write targets for each of your goals. It includes how many households it intends to serve in each category, which is the street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and homelessness prevention. We also look at you must show your previous 3 years of your performance goals for the previous 3 years that if you received ESG funding for 2017, 2018, and 2019. And on the next page is the sheet that is in the application that must be filled out for your previous outcomes, and the list of outcomes is listed on there. If you did not apply for funds for 2017, you could just put NA. If you didn't apply for any, if this is going to be your first time, please don't leave it blank. Just put something in there, NA, for whatever does not pertain to you, so we'll know that you looked at that page. And also on the next page, your performance targets. This is also in the application. We ask that you show your numbers for how many you think you'll be able to serve or you will be serving during the time for these your performance targets for the street outreach, shelter, rapid rehousing, or homelessness prevention. The next page is our COC review checklist. This is sent to all of our COC RABs to be filled out for each applicant that applied in their RAB. And please understand, this is also used, it's returned back to us, and it is also used for scoring based on your participation in the COC. So it's very important. We do, use this for scoring and determining funding. Next is the project budget. This page here is the overall budget of how much you're asking for, with all of your subrecipients, or if you have no subrecipients, this page is where you see all components at the top. But if you are submitting, or if you're going to have more than one subrecipient, we would also like to see a breakdown of how much you're going to be asking for each of your subrecipients. So you could have, 3 or 4 pages of a project budget, but we must see the overall budget for the amount you're asking for as a whole as well. The next 4 slides are your program design. As Brendan mentioned earlier, this is basically your need, your statement of need of why you're applying for the ESG funding. You are required to answer, if you're applying for rapid rehousing, you are required to answer all the 15 questions for however many subrecipients you have. If you have 4 subrecipients, then there should be four rapid rehousing program designs for each subrecipient. And that will be the same for your street outreach questions, which there are 9 questions for that. Your homelessness prevention, 13 questions, and your shelter emergency shelter has 14 questions. Again, for every subrecipient who is applying must fill out the program designs for each.
Stacy, can I also add that we encourage, especially those that have applied for ESG funding in the past, to really spend some time with these program design questions. They will look different than prior year's questions. We really look to realign some of the detail to know the most about your program, to be able to be best informed in making our funding determinations, and to best understand your programs, your projected outcomes, how you've determined the need in your community. So please make sure you're spending a little bit of time with this. This is really the bread and butter of the application and the critical elements that we want to see in your application. So especially for those who may have applied in the past, yeah, the form looks a little bit familiar, the layout's about the same, but the questions are very different. So make sure you're spending time with those questions and really providing a clear story of the need in your community and the design of your program to target and address those needs that are identified in your community.
Okay, Kathy?
Thank you. And now we'll have questions. The question we had, the previous question we had about the direct entitlement, Nicole, you'll find that on page 5, I believe, of the guidelines. And if you have any questions, you can contact me and we can talk more in depth.
And it looks like Dana asked, the proof of client served form, do they already have to be on file list, or is it enough that we're just starting with this grant? I'm not sure if I'm following you, Dana. Maybe contact us afterwards and we can talk.
Dana, I know we spoke yesterday briefly. This is Stacy, I'm sorry. If you want to just give me a call, and we can talk more in depth about your question. Okay, no more questions. So now we'll just go over again some reminders that we did mention throughout the webinar. For emergency shelter operations, funding requests should not exceed 18 months and no greater than 25% of the total operating budget of the shelter at the same time, for the same time period. Grantees are required to participate in the local COC and use the local coordinated entry process. 40% or greater of the funds will be used for rapid rehousing, and the written standards must be submitted with the application. Other reminders is prioritize support for goals of the Home Together Agencies are expected to use the Housing First model to provide services. The statement of need must be a data-informed explanation of the homelessness in your communities. Soliciting participants, how is the community notified of your available services? That's important. We need to know, how are you reaching out to people, letting them know that the ESG funds are available. Again, targeted activities are street outreach and housing locator services. All agencies funded with ESG, they must participate in the point in time count each year. Brenda mentioned that earlier. Applicants who previously returned funds will receive an automatic 25-point reduction in the scoring of their application. That's the reason, one of the reasons why I contact you guys throughout the contract period. If you're, please let me know if you're not spending, if you can't spend all of your funds, if you can't spend all your funds, let us know early, because we like to get that money back out on the street to other applicants, other grantees who may need additional funding. So that's important, and that's one of the reasons when you don't let us know throughout the contract period, and we find out at the end that you have to return funds, that's why you will receive the 25-point reduction. And our scoring criteria will continue to be on a 205-point maximum scale. Also, reporting requirements. Grantees are expected to highlight and include success stories at the mid-year mark, which is nine months, and at the closeout of the contract period, which is 18 months. Again, your success story has to be submitted, or you will not be able to submit the closeout. Closeout reports should be submitted with the final invoice no later than 30 days at the end of the contract. And ineligible funding we have is operations of coordinated entry. And if there are any more questions.
Stacy, can I note too, one of the things that, one of the questions that was, notations that we had earlier was regarding the state's ESG award for 2020. And our allocation this year was just a very slight increase, but an increase nonetheless of $5,776,000. So like I said, a slight increase, perhaps just about $10,000 more than last year, but just an important notation nonetheless.
It looks like Jen asked a couple questions. If our agency is submitting a collaborative application with multiple agencies providing services, do you want program forms for all agencies, or one collaborative form speaking to how the multiple agencies will work together to meet a component area? Jen, we would like for you to submit one for each agency, even if they are providing if multiple are providing rapid rehousing. And additionally, Jen asked if ESG is ESG looking for written standards outside what was approved by the Eastern COC? Can our local adopt the COC written standards? Yes, Jen, we expect that your COC or your local area would adopt the Eastern COC's written standards, and you would just submit those with your application. Okay, it doesn't look like Sarah will be joining us for this next portion of the presentation, so we asked her to put these slides together and give us some notes, and me and Stacy are going to do our best to report on this information, but if you do have any additional questions, maybe you didn't understand the notes or what we're mentioning, just reach out to myself or Stacy and we can get you in contact with customer service. Or just call customer service.
I will stress, if for anything related to the migration of Keystone login, contact customer service and contact them early in this process. Please don't wait until the end. The transition from the PA logon to Keystone, especially if you want to be able to migrate any old reports and any old resources you have, we really encourage you to contact them early on in the process.
Because Sarah did share with me, this is Stacy, I believe for any of you vets on the recall here, I think there were some changes since December for this process. So it is important that you do contact them, or if you have any questions, because there were some changes since December. So that was since last year. So Brendan and I are going to try and attempt to explain the slides that Sarah from customer service had sent to us for her to go over.
Okay, so this is where you'll start off, it appears, the single application web login. You'll see the link there. If you click on that, it'll take you to this page. And she did highlight a couple of important notes here. New users, if this is your first time applying using with the Keystone login, you want to click on the registration button. Existing users will log in with their username and password out on the right hand side there where it says login. If you don't remember your password, you'll see she does have an area where it is highlighted underneath the Keystone login logo where you can go and reset your password. And then any walkthroughs or assistance, maybe some guides that customer service has available, you can find under that walkthroughs section of the page. Just a couple notes. If a customer does forget their password and requests a new password, an email will be sent to the registered email address. If you do not have access to that registered email address, you will not be able to reset the password. If you forgot your password, you will go to the Keystone login and customer will need to know their username to reset. If unknown, you can contact DCED's customer service center. If you're a township or a municipality, you most likely have already migrated their accounts because of MStats. But if you're not sure if your account has migrated over to this Keystone login, you can contact customer service.
Okay, the next page, the Keystone login, new account. These are for if this is your first time logging in. You just pretty much want to answer the questions here. And she has an important note that you must return to the single application website to complete an application. After you complete this, and then there's the application website or the e-signature portal for signatures, and that site is on there as well. She also noted that the Keystone login now is used by most state agencies, that the system will not return you to single application once you do the initial registration. That's why she's saying you must go back to the website to complete the application. Customers will also have to go to the e-signature portal to e-sign documents. Again, that's why it's noted in red on there as well. Keystone login is only a more secure house to store usernames and passwords across the Commonwealth. Keystone login, which is your username and password, is now being accepted anywhere the Keystone login logo is seen. And she has on here, if you have any needs of additional assistance or if you're getting errors or on the registration page, to contact customer service at 1-800-379-7448.
So for this step, this would be if you were previously registered under the old account system and need to migrate your old login to the new Keystone account system. This will require PA credentials. If unknown, contact customer service. There's a running theme here. Your Keystone login is what is your credentials. Basically says again, if the username is taken, it will throw an error at red asking for a new username. Your date of birth is required. As you'll see on the left-hand side there, everything with a little asterisk next to it would be a required field that you need to complete. And passwords must be a minimum of 12 characters, which would include alphabetical, a numeric, a symbol, uppercase, lowercase, and cannot be a part of any first or last name. And again, she has on there the fact about you must return to the single application website to complete an application and the e-signatures page for signatures.
And an important notation with this new system, so for a lot of agencies, you may have used one global account associated with everyone in your agency to access ESA or the PA login when you're doing a single application through DCED. You'll note from the security credentials that are included in this new system that a login is assigned not universally any longer. So you're noting that your own personal, your date of birth, your information in there. So DCED is not able to reset passwords like they may have done in the past for an ESA. We don't have access to your information. So that's why these extra levels of credentialing and security questions are required. As Brendan said, this is a way to provide more secure information or more security for the information that you're providing into the system as well. So just be mindful of that, especially I know having worked for an agency that had one login and everyone used the same login, that's not any longer the practice with Keystone. So just be mindful of that if you're going into that system as well.
Okay, so the next slide is for Keystone Login Migrate PA log for existing Keystone account users. So it just has on here what you would put in your PA login credential, you would put in your Keystone login credential, and if you don't know what that is, for that you would contact customer service again at 800-379-7448. And they'll provide that information. And again, the important note again about that you have to return to single app website to complete the application or the e-signature portal for signatures, e-signatures.
And she just has on here some additional notes for registration. If you're an authorized signatory for contracting purposes, you will need to have a Keystone login associated to the email address that you provide to the ESG office. If you do not already have a Keystone login, you will need one in order to e-sign documents. She made sure to note, just for security reasons again, please refrain from using group email addresses. And then each signatory's email address needs to be unique. So here's the e-signature process. The e-signature requests are generated from esignature@pa.gov, and just to note that they can end up going to the spam folder, so just double check that when you are going through this process. You should click on the click here to review and sign this request link within the email, and that'll take you to the spot where you would go and sign the request. Customers can also access e-signature portal directly by going to that website. That's in the second box. If they opt to go there directly, they will log in with their Keystone login username and password. The email address provided to the program offices needs to match the email address used to create an account in the Keystone login in order to see any e-signature requests within the portal. So again, your emails must match up.
And then the e-signature process, she has here that you must, the directions here at the bottom to view the contract documents for e-signing. There's a legal disclaimer box that must be checked before sending off. And she also has that you save your documents in PDFs or view them prior to signing. You must confirm that your first and last name, your title, and your email address are accurate. Acknowledge the legal disclaimer, and finally you'll just click and sign. And then a confirmation that the signature request has been approved will appear, and that was all that you need to do at that time. So that's all we have for the application, the e-signatures, and for customer service. We're sorry that Sarah couldn't join us. But if you have questions, please, I know Brendan and we are not familiar with this process, so please contact customer service, as soon as possible. Don't wait till the last day to submit the application, and they'll be able to assist you. Again, their number is 1-800-379-7448. And then finally, for resources, ESG, the website and best practices for homeless emergency assistance and rapid transition to housing, the HEARTH Act, the website's there, the interim ESG regs, 24 CFR Part 576, the website is there, and HEARTH homeless definition final rule, and the PA East and West balance of state COC website is there, and of course DCED's Department of Community and Economic website is posted there. Also, solutions and best practice to ending homelessness, the solutions database, federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness, and what gets measured gets done, a toolkit on performance measurement for ending homelessness. Our homelessness team with Community and Housing Development, our director, Kathy Possinger, myself, Stacy, Hawthorne, Brendan Auman, Antonio, Tony Diaz, and Ritu Parmore is our PAHMIS consultant.
That's all we have, unless there's some questions related to the e-signature process. Nicole, you asked about housing authority applicant eligibility again. Housing authorities are not eligible applicants. And Jen asked about the evaluation process that we cannot share at this time, but we review the program designs and all the information submitted with the application. That all is evaluated for scoring.
We will note that Sarah Smith from customer service has joined us.
Sorry, I was being held in another meeting.
So if there are some specific questions about the e-signature process, the Keystone login process, Sarah is able to address them. Sarah, our principal message and theme was to contact customer service.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
So if there are some specific things that folks should be mindful of in that process, that would be helpful if you want to articulate anything, any big nuances that you want to make sure folks are mindful of. We've shared your information.
Great. Well, thanks for covering that. Really, the big thing is just to iterate that if you have already migrated an account or you've already accessed and you've moved your account over to the Keystone login, you don't need to create a second or third or fourth account. You've already got access to the system the way that you need to. If you are working on an e-signature, the e-signature email address that you give to your ESG folks needs to also have a Keystone login associated with it. That's the really big thing. So if you give them abc@county.com and you don't have a Keystone login associated to abc@county.com, when they send out the e-signature request, you're never going to see it. You're going to be wondering why you're not seeing it. That's because you have to have abc@county.com associated to your Keystone login so that you can bridge those two together and you can see the e-signature request that they send you. So that's the really big thing, is just to make sure that the e-signature emails are associated properly to their Keystone login. But other than that, really, I'm sure you guys did a great job. So everyone here should be pretty much familiar, right? Do you have any new guests?
There's a few new
Okay.
on there that we didn't
All right.
recognize.
So if they've never done anything in ESA, they'll just register a brand new account with Keystone login. So they don't have to worry about migrating anything, and that's probably the easiest.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for participating. If you have any follow-up questions, again, please feel free to reach out to myself or Stacy for programmatic questions or application questions, and any of the e-signature processes to contact customer service.
When will this be on for them for reporting?
Yes, and this was recorded, and I will share it again on our website, both the COC website, DCED's website, and on Workplace by Facebook. So if anyone in your agency did not have a chance to review it, you can direct them to one of those 3 places. So thank you everyone, and good luck this year in your applications.
Thank you.
Bye.